You're back in the smoke-filled room. I say in because at 50 degrees outside is the time of this recording. I think we all want to be outside. I was this close to recording this episode outside, but then I realized it would take an hour to pull everything out of storage and put the back together, and I'm too lazy to do that. So I'm still inside, desperately hoping I can get outside and work on my Irish tan. So I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I'm looking forward to finally getting some nice weather here because it's been brutal lately. In the meantime, our politics have been a little brutal and certainly anything but boring. So we've got a lot we have to get into. So let me introduce our special guest this week. We have Nicole Laha. She's the state representative for the 82nd District, previously served as a trustee in Homer Glen. She's also a small business owner. Nicole, we're glad you're with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm it's an exciting week to be on, that's for sure. So I look forward to the show.
Yeah, and if you don't already, make sure you connect with Nicole on social media. She has the second cutest kids on the planet behind, of course, my boy. And so it's fun to follow her and see all their adventures.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We also have with us Carolyn Schofield. She's served in state and local government for over 20 years, got a lot of experience. She's the McHenry County representative and vice chair on the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. She's also on the McHenry County Health Board, and she's an expert on state policy in the legislature. Carolyn, glad you're with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. We also have with us Katie Clancy. She's the chair of the Illinois Center Right Coalition. She works for Americans for Tax Reform. She previously worked with the Illinois Opportunity Project. So no stranger to wearing a lot of hats. Katie, what's going on? Glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We also have with us the yin and yang of our episodes, Chris and Michael. I had somebody to just yesterday make bend my ear for 15 minutes on how much they love the fact that you two balance each other out. That Chris is always the cranky one, and Michael's always the optimist. Chris sometimes the villain, Michael the hero. So
Oh,
I don't know.
wow.
They really like the dynamics of you two. Not so much me, by the way. They just wanted to compliment you two. So there you go.
Wow, you can
Nobody's watching this show to view you, Colin, or hear any of your opinions. We're the real talent here. You can see the views dip when it's not Chris and Michael and some other jamokes that Colin might have. So pay attention,
There
everybody
was one
watching.
person who responded to our survey saying that one of you two should host. So there you go. You've started the
Yeah.
trend already.
I don't
So
know
let's
if
get into it.
we want that much responsibility, Colin.
I mean, listen, I'm happy to pass it on. The hours I put together, spend putting this agenda together, I'd be happy to pass that off. So anytime you want, just let me know. Speaking of that agenda, let's get into the first topic. We've got some big ones to cover. First of which is State Senator Dan McConchie has resigned. There's some politics to go with this, but before we do that, I really just want to focus on Dan McConchie and his service. Nicole, I would be failing in my duties as a host if I didn't let you go first. I know you've served with Dan, you've worked with Dan. Just your thoughts on Dan and his service to the state of Illinois.
Yeah, I was honored to be his press secretary for the 102nd General Assembly, and I learned so much. Just talking about him as a person, he is extremely kind. He is extremely honest, and he really cares truly about what the work he is doing. I'd like to say I humanized him a little bit when I started working with him. He's very stoic and he takes things very seriously, but don't let that fool you. He definitely served with his heart, and I'm really excited to see what's next for him. His family is great, and he is extremely passionate about serving in any capacity. So it was a true honor to work with him.
Well, I'm glad you did what you did. I mean, he always reminded me, not in politics, but a little bit personality and style, like Mitt Romney. If you ever saw that documentary Mitt, where you saw like the real human Mitt Romney, and you're like, wow, if this was the candidate we got in 2012, Obama might not have had a second term because you saw a real human being. And as you said, Dan's always been a policy guy. That's been his focus. So you never really got a lot of that personality.
Yeah.
But you know what? I did see more of it come out later in his service, so maybe that's due to you. So you did a good service there for
We
Dan.
used to fight about social media all the time, and it's a good fight we had. But yeah, I'm gonna miss him. Knowing that you have someone that real in the building is a really nice feeling. He was a true friend.
Well,
Is
I would imagine There were a lot of people who were concerned when Dan got into office that he'd be a single issue legislator because that's what he focused on prior to his service. And I will commend him for the fact that that wasn't the case, that Dan touched on a lot of issues that were important to him and to his constituents. And that's what you want, and whether you agree with the stances or disagree, you always knew that he was doing what he felt was right, which, as much as that sounds common sense, to be honest, in Springfield and in our politics nowadays, it's actually fairly rare. So I give Dan kudos for that and thank him.
And sort of related, but I'll never forget, I had that opportunity to work a little bit with him with campaign too, very small. I was more official. I'll never forget walking into the room and just seeing this heavy face. And I just remember thinking, you're the leader, you control the money, start fighting back in your own race. And he said something that I will never forget. And he said, have you ever tried to feed your whole family and realize you only have money for two of them? And it blew my mind that this man was willing to starve so he could feed other people. I think that says a lot.
Well, and I think that's what we got to keep in mind because you got a lot of people who are talking about this, the 26th Senate district and pointing to, how it has been growing harder to hold for Republicans, which is true. And we'll talk about those dynamics. And they say how, Democrats didn't spend as much as they could have to take them out. But what they neglect to say in that story is that Republicans also didn't spend as much as they could have to hold on to the seat. And of course, they conveniently leave that out of the narrative. Let's get into that a little bit and talk about Senate District 26 because there is a bit of a firestorm that's erupted here over the process to replace Dan and who would fill out the rest of his term and possibly run for it. So let me give a quick rundown and then we'll open it up for everybody's thoughts. So Dan McConchie has come out publicly and said that he would like Joe Salvi to be his replacement. Joe is the son of Kathy and Al Salvi. He works in the family law practice. He's worked in a number of different spaces, both in government and in politics. For a 20, I think he's 28, maybe 30, but for a young guy, he's got a good amount of experience. And Dan has said, as have people around him like Lynn O'Brien and some of the others, have said that they very strongly want Joe to be the replacement. Aaron Del Mar, who's the Palatine Township committeeman, also until recently served as the state Republican Party chairman, has expressed interest. We don't know if he's going to officially put his name in, but he certainly has expressed interest. But the name that's garnished the most attention is Marty McLaughlin. He's the state representative for one half of that district. He has put out strong interest in this and has rallied a lot of support behind him to be that person. There's a handful of other names that have come up, people who want the position or at least thinking about it, but those are the big three that are really part of the discussion. Ultimately, this choice is going to be made between, I think there's 5 individuals who will be on this committee who will make the choice, but really it comes down to the fact that the Lake County Chairman, Keith Brin, has over 50% of the vote. So in reality, his vote is going to be the deciding factor on who gets that replacement. The interviews are going to be done over the next few weeks, and then a choice will be made. I don't want to give all the details here because I'm sure some of you want to have some fun sharing some of the juicy details. So that's enough groundwork laying. Who wants to jump in with just things they've heard or things that they've seen about the whole situation?
I can jump in because I've actually been part of a appointing process before for a Senate seat. So it is a very stressful time, I think, for all parties involved. And I think the most important thing is to let the process play out. That's why everyone's jumping in, and we are always, quick to social media and press releases. And it just would be nice to allow that process to play out and see the quality of candidates that pop up and what they have to offer, and let those individuals that have the votes into the process be able to exercise their right to have that. So little disappointed that there's been so much drama already associated with that, but hopefully people will still step up and get the opportunity to take part in that process.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to the Senate Republicans and Keith Brin. They've slowed the process down. Initially, they wanted to move fast simply because they wanted to give the new legislator a chance to go down to Springfield and file their own legislation, start to build up a profile. That's part of the reason why you want someone to fill a seat. Nicole, I know you had that opportunity when you filled the seat, so there's some value to that. However, the deadline to file your own bills has passed, so shell bills are going to be required either way. So they made the smart move to slow the process down so that the whole process could be transparent. And as you said, Carolyn, that everyone could have a chance to put their name in if they'd like, get interviewed if they like, and then let's see what cream rises to the top. So kudos to Senate Republicans and Keith that they've slowed this process down to allow that to happen.
See, in my opinion, this is another wonderful case of people can't do math. And this seems to be the case in every single appointment for any position, Republican, Democrat, or otherwise, because people come out, especially in this case, where people are making like public statements. We know who McConchie wants. Marty McLaughlin, for our plan trusters out there, he's going full steam ahead. But none of that matters. I don't care if Jeannie Ives endorses our boy Marty for this position. It's not Jeannie Ives' decision who's going to get this spot. It's Keith Brin's, basically. So none of these press releases, none of these, news articles or endorsements are really going to make a difference unless you can work behind the scenes and start working Brin. I guess work the rest of the committee if you want it unanimous. But if you really want this position, you don't need public endorsements to make this happen. I'm sure in circumstances you need those things. They can be nice, but in reality, you need to work the backroom deals in these type of situations. You don't like that, that's politics. But it's just another instance that people can't do math. There's one man who decides this process, and none of us have any say in it.
Well, that's fair. I mean, you mentioned Marty McLaughlin's lined up some endorsements. The Illinois, sorry, Fingston. Illinois Review has come out and talked about it, and it sounds like they're strongly preferring McLaughlin. You mentioned Jeannie Ives. He's got a number of other people to make calls on his behalf, certainly trying to ramp up that sort of public pressure. But to your point, this isn't really a public sort of pressure situation. It's, a handful of people who are going to be making this decision. And I think the dynamics are going to be interesting because Aaron's one of those people who will have a vote, and he's one of those people who's interested in the seat. So you better believe that anybody who puts their name in is going to face some tough questions. So I think to Carolyn's point, I love that. I'd love to see how these interviews go because this is not going to be patty cake. Anyone who puts their name in this is going to have a tough time answering those questions, which is what we should want. If you're going to be in a tier 1 race, it's going to be a multi-million-dollar race in 2026, then you better be able to handle the scrutiny of an interview process.
I like that you bring that up. I think a lot of people aren't aware of what happens in the appointment process, right? You've got 5 or 6, I think I had 7 individuals, and you sit somewhat either in a room or in a Zoom, and they nail you with questions. This is not an easy softball type of interview. It wasn't for me, at least. And so I think, Carolyn is really right. I want to believe that this process is going to go to the best qualified individual. Don't forget, this is going to be a seat they are going to come hard for. This is a very vulnerable seat. This needs to be a person that appeals to the masses. It needs to be a person that's not only going to get through a likely primary, but also possibly it will be a general. And so it's really important that they can think on their feet, that they know what's going on, that they're liked, that they're a likable person. And it is a very intense process. I laugh. Someone asked me what was harder, getting appointed to Jim Durkin's seat or winning your first election. They're very hard. Both are very hard. Yeah.
Well, I think you mentioned it right. I mean, you mentioned that there could be a primary. I mean, McLaughlin has already come out and said that if it goes to Selvey, he will run in a primary. There's a lot of people who are concerned. They're claiming nepotism because Kathy Selvey is the state Republican Party chairperson, and it would be her son. That's Joe Selvey. I can say that, Kathy's a parent. Al's a parent. Of course, they want their kid. Of course, they want to see their kid succeed and do great things. But I also know, I know firsthand, I've asked the question. They've been very careful here not to put their thumb on the scale. They've done a lot to support Keith Brin in Lake County, and yet they haven't really called that card in and said, hey, you owe us. And so, there's always going to be people concerned over questions about, how did somebody get an appointment? But at the end of the day, it's going to be who has the best interview. Keith has said it. He wants to see how people interview. If Joe falls flat in his face in that interview, he's not going to get it. Keith has said it, even though that's Dan's preference. And of course, we all want to show some deference to the sitting senators, to their preference. But if Joe falls flat in those interviews, it ain't going to be Joe. If Marty falls flat, it ain't going to be Marty. If Aaron does put his name in, doesn't do well, it ain't going to be Aaron. I mean, these interviews are going to be the key deciding factor. And so if you're interested in this, you better make sure you're ready for those interviews. I think go ahead.
Yeah, I would add, in some seats across the state, if you get an appointment, like, you're set for life. If you're in a safe district and, you do, not that McConchie or anyone would do like the bare minimum, but, some of these solidly Democrat appointments, they're set for life. This position would not be that. They would have to work really, really hard the next election cycle. So who's ever up for that challenge as well.
Well, I think that's been part of the challenge here. I mean, we haven't talked about it yet on this podcast, but 2026 does have the potential to be a tough year for Republicans. It's an off year, and lately we've been doing worse than off years, not better, which is sort of bucking the trend of what it had been for a very long time. And this district is going to be tough. You've got both Nabila Saeed is hinting that she would like it. Maria Peterson is still out there that she certainly has already said she wants it. So you've got 2 very difficult candidates to beat. And we don't have the latest baseline numbers for that district. But as of November, it was just an R+2 district, which is a huge change. Because back in 2016, it was more of an R11 district, and then 18 it was R7, and then it was R3, and as a matter of fact, in 2022, Republicans did very badly. It was a -7 for us in 2022. So this, as you said, Katie's absolutely right. This is going to be an incredibly tough seat to hold on to, not only because the dynamics are changing in the suburbs during this current Trump era, but even worse, because you're going to face a difficult opponent. Nabila, Maria, two tier 1 recruits on the Democratic Party. They've got an embarrassment of riches in which one they decide to go with and running in this race. So whoever gets this has better be ready for the fight of their lives, because this very well may end up being one of the top 1, 2, 3, 4 races in the entire state in 2026. And so that's why I'm glad Republicans are taking it as seriously as they are, because it's not enough to just hold it for the next 2 years. You've got to win it again. We can't lose ground despite already being in the super minority. And Marty has talked about his electability. On the flip side, some people have concerns that he barely won his half of the district, and his half is the more Republican half of the district. And so there's a little bit of a concern there. But with Joe, let's be real, he is young. He doesn't have as much experience. And as much as I love Kathy and Al, let's just talk politics for a second. If Joe's the candidate, he's going to be tied to all of Kathy and Al's very conservative positions on the life issue and their previous statements on that issue. I don't even know where Joe stands on that, but he's going to be tied to Kathy and Al's positions over the years. And so both of them, and again, Aaron has, if he does put his name in, he has his detractions as well. And so none of them are going to be that perfect candidate. So the key is going to be which is the best of the bunch, who puts us in the best possible position. Anybody have thoughts just on the trends of that district? Chris, I know you've been watching trends in the suburbs. I mean, obviously the district's been trending pretty rough for us.
Yeah, especially that eastern portion of the district that's in House District 51, Nabila Saeed. I mean, people told me, I've been saying this podcast for a long time. People say that that's a Republican district. It's not. There's an argument that can be made that this is truly a purple district, and it's certainly a down ballot Republican district. McConchie did win basically by not helping himself, despite not helping himself in 2022, and but it was only by a very slim margin. This time you're looking at this is going to be more of an open seat, and it's probably going to benefit the Democrats down ballot a little bit here, because who's ever going to be up hasn't been on the ballot for the whole district. There is an argument to be made. This is not an endorsement, nor is it one that I'm saying is the right argument, but there is an argument to be made that you said you put Marty McLaughlin into that seat, and he might put Joe into the House district, because maybe Joe can hold the House district, maybe Marty can hold the Senate district, and Marty's already shown he doesn't need help from the caucus or the party to win his elections, because we just trust the plan over here, I guess. There's an argument to be made that you should do that. Will it ever happen? Probably not, but there's an argument to be made that maybe you should do that. We'll see what happens.
The issue with that is going to be simply the relationship between McConchie and McLaughlin. It's not good, and I don't think McConchie is going to be on board with any sort of a plan that gets McLaughlin the seat. But again, there's a lot to play out here, so we're going to have to wait and see how it all plays out. Last thing we haven't covered here is just some of the other tangential politics, because as was mentioned, it's not the Republican Party if we don't have lots of drama. And so Aaron Del Mar had already previously resigned his position from the Illinois Republican Party as co-chairman, but he stayed on to help with the transition. Well, he's now officially stepped down and said, I'm not going to stay on anymore to help with the transition because of the situation. Also, people may not know it, but his deputy, or I think committee woman, I'm not sure the term exactly, is Lynn O'Brien, who is Dan McConchie's right-hand person, who is also strongly supporting Joe Selvey, and Aaron has fired her from what I've seen. I haven't been able to get proof of it, but I've seen some people say that he has fired her from that position, which is his right, but it does seem a little bit to be retribution based on this whole situation. So, we've got drama on top of drama, and there's several weeks left in this process. So, I have a feeling that the drama is only going to build, sadly. All right, well, go ahead, close this out.
I was going to make, when the Democrats had a contentious appointment process last cycle in, God, I don't even remember what seat it was. It was the one on the north side, when the incumbent left to become Brandon Johnson's deputy chief of staff. And it turned into the bajillion-dollar primary. That's all it was. It was contentious at the appointment process. They duked it out in the primary, and then you don't even hear about that district anymore. I hope the Republican Party can figure this out next few weeks and kind of forget all about this. But you and I both know that's not true. We're going to make this a stupid process, so we'll see.
Yeah, we'll make it as painful as humanly possible. That's what we do. All right, let's go from one drama to the next. If you haven't noticed in the agenda, I'm trying to knock out all the drama right away so we can move on to the rest of the stuff that actually matters. So let's knock out the other piece of drama from this last week, which is the fight between the House Republican Minority Leader Tony McCombie and the Illinois Freedom Caucus. It's grown. The whole situation has devolved. I've said on previous episodes, I'm going to say again, a pox on everybody involved with this. This is just stupid that we're even dealing with this, but we need to talk about it. So, as we mentioned before, the no members of the Freedom Caucus were assigned to Tony's leadership team, which that's her right. It's her leadership team. But things have gotten even worse, where now the members of the Freedom Caucus have been stripped of their staffers, and they are no longer have support on communications. They've lost their offices, which I found out in a phone call today, which are usually chosen by seniority, but instead this time they were not. There's definitely been some retribution here. Now, some people believe it's been earned. That's certainly something that we may be able to share here on this podcast. As I said, I think I've heard enough this week about this. I've gotten way too many phone calls to where my position is just sit around the table, just be adults. This is really ridiculous on both sides. Yeah, you know what? The coverage on this has been a little bit more negative towards the Freedom Caucus, so I will kind of defend them slightly, which is, I don't know that they've earned this level of retribution. What ends up happening in all these situations is this side does something stupid against them, so then they retaliate, so then they retaliate. I don't even know where this started. I just know we're on like the 37th level of one group retaliating against the other, and now the Freedom Caucus, I'm sure they're going to retaliate against McCombie, and this is just going to keep devolving to the point where this is what we're focused on instead of all the crazy bills the Democrats are trying to run, and how Pritzker and his pals are trying to drive the state into the ground. But instead, we're talking about, this kind of drama. There's more details I can share, but I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in. To our guests, I don't want to put you guys in a bad spot if this isn't something you want to cover. So Chris and Michael, you guys kick us off first, and then anyone else who'd like to talk, feel free.
I mean, I just think we've talked about it over and over and over again, and I just come to the same conclusion. We just need a little dose of maturity, and people need to act like adults.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good summary.
My opinion is that basically I think this might be a little extreme. Taking away staffers, take away offices. Certainly do someone understand where the leader's coming from, because I think Freedom Caucus asked for 3 positions in leadership, which I think sounds like a lot. I think they should have been asking for 1, maybe. That would have made a lot more sense, perhaps. But either way, it's a bargaining chip. Again, another instance of like just us fighting each other down in Springfield instead of like trying to get something accomplished. All it is front page news for Cap Facts and all these other news
that want to make us look bad. I mean, I think that's the key, right? We're giving fodder to people who want to make Republicans look bad, and now this is what we're talking about. It just makes it that this is the topic that we can't even manage our own caucus. Chris, I dug into that a little bit, and yeah, you're right. When McCombie did, because I got confirmation, McCombie did reach out to Rhett Miller to try to mend fences, so kudos to her for that. Rhett Miller said, Chris Miller said, "Let me talk to my people and get back to you." They got back and said they'd like 3 leadership positions, and McCombie said, "Hell no, that's not going to happen." And as you said, they're asking for a bit much there. They base it on seniority, and they do have a good amount of seniority within that group. But 3 was asking for too much. But apparently, and I've only heard this from one side, but apparently they said, okay, then what are you willing to do? What are you willing to give us? And supposedly the response back from McCombie was one word, nothing. And that was the end of it. Again, I don't have confirmation on that. I would love to get confirmation. Maybe that's wrong, but that at least is what the Freedom Caucus people are saying. And again, yeah, did they ask for too much? Sure, but I don't know. Are you also on the McCombie side? Are you willing to work with them truly so we can mend these fences? I understand they've been against you as leader, but a good leader sort of sucks that up and says, yeah, but that's what you take as leader. You take the arrows. That's your job. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying it's the job. And McCombie's a tough person. I know she can handle it. So I don't know. I think, again, there are mistakes and faults on both sides here. But Chris, I do agree with you. I think this was a little bit much. This was certainly taking it a little bit too far. I've talked to some of the more reasonable people that are part of that group, and they were like, come on, we're trying. They're trying to call and text and try to bring these two together, these 2 groups together, and get everyone at the table. And it's just personality conflicts and maybe a little bit of ego are getting in the way, and we don't have time for this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm there. I see it. I think anybody who knows me knows I'm trying. I'm a problem solver. If I can't solve a problem, I get very upset. Um, Obviously, this is something that has started way before me. I'm kind of new coming into this, so I guess I have a fresh perspective. You know, that being said, yes, there are some issues and there are differences, and you know, the Freedom Caucus feels very strongly in their convictions. Leader McCombie feels very strongly in hers. A common sense thinker is going to see a little bit of both sides, right? In that, what's happening is we're losing sight of the commonalities that we do have. We're losing sight of the very important ground we should be focusing on right now, like our elected officials blatantly lying on their social medias to their constituents about services that have and have not been interrupted. We're ignoring an extremely important fact that our governor is fear mongering to children in our education system. These are all things that if we really want to, we can choose to start to focus on and move in the same direction. I would love to see that happen. You know, I like to say I have open lines of communication to both sides. I feel and see a lot, and you know, like you said, there's a lot of back and forth. But I really hope, for the sake of the rest of the caucus, for the sake of Republicans in Illinois, it's time to just find those commonalities that I know we can focus on. They're there. Trust me, they're there. We just have to really get back on path.
Yeah, and I'd say to close this topic out, I'd simply say to both sides, listen, to the Freedom Caucus, McCombie's the leader for the next 2 years. There's no changing that. So it is what it is, whether you like it or not. If you don't like it, try to replace her in 2 years. But that's your mechanism to do it. And to Tony McCombie, the Freedom Caucus ain't going anywhere. You know, the some groups tried to take them out in their own primaries and failed miserably. This is not a group that's going anywhere. And so I think to both sides, it's just let's cut it out. Let's move on. I like the fact. I mean, listen, I've seen Freedom Caucus both in D.C. and in Illinois. I've seen the days when they were just completely unwilling to work with the Republican Party. This iteration of the Illinois Freedom Caucus has shown some willingness, some olive branches, knocking on doors for people who aren't even part of their caucus, donating to candidates who aren't even part of their caucus. Certainly, I know you want more out of them, and I get it, but there's more of an olive branch than, frankly, you know, ask Mike Johnson in D.C. how much help he gets from the Freedom Caucus. Like, you're not getting that in Illinois. There are some olive branches. Take them and run with them. It's never going to be perfect, but please, can we all please move on? I really, really don't want to make this a topic of another SFR in the future. With that, I'm going to take my own advice and move on. Let's get to the topics that really matter here. As you mentioned, Nicole, let's talk about some of these J.B. Pritzker and some of these politicians who are lying to the Illinois public and, frankly, making people less safe. It seems like we're always going to be talking immigration, at least for a while on these podcasts, because it's the top issue. These next, 2 or 3 topics here are all immigration. And this first one is simply this. There's been a number of stories that have been highlighted over the last week of the people who Pritzker and the Democrats and their policies are protecting, because ultimately they're saying that they want criminals who are non-citizens to be removed from this state and this country. That's what they say. But then in their actions and their policies, they completely make that not allowable and not possible. And they fight against every entity that tries to actually do the thing they claim to be for. And who are those people that they're protecting? Well, here's the thing. Just in this last week, there was a hit and run in Urbana that resulted in 2 fatalities. It was an illegal immigrant who did it. He jumped on a bus to Mexico. We ended up catching him 800 miles away, thankfully, but he killed 2 people. You've got another illegal immigrant who was caught, who had a rap sheet that included sex crimes against minors. You had, I saw somewhere that ICE had arrested 6 sex offenders, 3 gang members, and 2 illegals just this past weekend. And then another guy with 2 DUI convictions had been arrested. I mean, it's not, CNN likes to run the story of the grandfather who was, picked up and is now going to be ripped away from his kids. And we can talk about that, because personally, that's not something I would love to see or that I'm for. But the reality is they're going after the criminals, especially in sex crimes, these gang members, murderers, people that absolutely everybody supposedly agrees needs to go. Go back to Obama in 2014. If you're a criminal, you'll be deported. Supposedly, they all agree with this, and yet these are the types of people they're defending. Michael, I know you've been following this closely. Jump to you first on this, because I know it's driving you crazy.
Yeah, I know one of the things that Tom Homan has made extremely clear is that these sanctuary states and the sanctuary cities actually make it more likely that illegal immigrants that have not committed crimes other than entering this country illegally get caught. Because if Department of Corrections in the state of Illinois would notify ICE that, hey, we've got this individual in custody that, that committed a hit and run, or maybe they were pulled out, arrested for a DUI or something of that nature. If they would notify ICE, they could go directly to the county jail or wherever that person is being held, take that person into custody and deport them. What's happening now is, they'll have somebody in custody that is here illegally that has committed a serious crime. They're serving their time with the state of Illinois, getting released. Well, then ICE has to go and try to find that individual out in the community. So whenever they go to their apartment or the house that they're staying in, and there are other people that are here illegally that have not committed serious crimes, ICE isn't going to, turn a blind eye to that and say, oh, well, we'll just ignore that and let you stay, and only arrest the hardened criminal. So they want to act like they're, trying to protect people. But at the end of the day, they're making ICE spend more time and resources finding people that are very dangerous to our communities, and it's a problem.
It's an interesting perspective. I mean, certainly if Illinois would actually do what we claim to do and work with the law enforcement agencies, there would be much less of a need for these raids, which are leading to those unintended consequences that Pritzker and the Democrats are saying they'd like to avoid. So it's a fair point, Michael.
Yep.
And if I can say too, it was the irony in Pritzker's comments of, that they welcomed the coming in and of taking of criminals, and that they're welcome to go into the jails anytime they want. Yet, to Michael's point, they're not in the jails anymore because the state law has forced us to release them. So,
yeah. Or as we talked about in previous episodes, I think it was Terry Bryan who said they used to have a presence in the jails to help facilitate that process. And in Illinois, they've been removed from the jails. ICE has. So they can't even, Pritzker says like, hey, sure, come find them, come get them. But then we're like, no, but you actually can't come in. So it's that double speak, that Pritzker is frankly at this point famous for. And, he doesn't get called out on it by the media because they're in his pocket. But, some of us got to do that dirty work of actually calling out to the truth.
I mean, at the end of the day, Pritzker and the Department of Corrections, they know who these individuals are, and in most cases, they know where they're located. But Pritzker wants to force ICE to play this game of like, where's Waldo? Where it's like, hey, we know where they're at, but you don't. Good luck.
Yep.
And it's sad.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
In many cases, I can understand why the Democrats or even the Republicans take certain positions on certain issues, even if I don't agree with them. They make sense in a grander political scale, or you could just attribute it to human depravity in some cases. This is an instance where I genuinely don't understand why they're taking the position that they're taking. I don't know what votes they're gaining by refusing to cooperate with deporting criminal illegal immigrants. I don't get it. Like, there is an argument to be made, like Collin mentioned earlier, that there is nuance within the issue of illegal and undocumented immigration. That maybe you don't want to deport someone's abuela who's been here since 1996, not really hurting anybody, just doesn't have papers. Are you going to deport that person? Probably not. But when it comes to criminal, illegal aliens living in the United States for one reason or another, I don't see what political capital Democrats gain by sticking up for them, keeping them in this country, other than the absolute chaos theory, which is like, people doing bad things helps the Democrats politically, but from the last 2 years, we've seen that that's usually helping the Republicans. So I don't know what the political angle is here.
We have a seventh guest who appears to have a strong feeling on this matter, so we'll get their thoughts in a second. Chris, to your point, I mentioned last week a poll that came out on this topic. There's yet another one this week, a Quinnipiac University poll that showed that 85% of voters support deporting illegal immigrants who've been convicted of violent crimes. 45% support deporting all illegal immigrants, which is that balance, right? That's a huge 40% gap between those who are convicted of violent crimes versus just if they're here illegally, and 60% approve of the illegal immigration crackdown under Trump, including 57% of independents. So voters are on the side of this. No matter how much the Democrats and the media, I repeat myself, but no matter how much they try to highlight, the one mistake that was made over here, or the one person over there who shouldn't have been picked up, to try to make this look bad, or look, everyone's so afraid. They're really trying to play that up. Really, even despite that, the American people are with what's being done here. So, as you said, this isn't where they're going to gain votes, though they continue to try.
Well, and Pritzker's doing this thing where he's, like most politicians, talking out of both sides of his mouth, where he says, "Oh yeah, I approve." He says that he approves of deporting dangerous criminals, but then on the flip side, he makes statements like he did 2 days ago, where he's saying if they want to come for people in my state, they're going to have to come through me. Acting like he's tough.
Yeah.
It's like.
Yeah. Like he's a street brawler or something. Listen, I'm Irish. Meet me in an Irish bar. Any bar stool near me is going to be a weapon. So if you want to brawl, I'm good for it. But I don't think we need to brawl over something this important. Let's just focus on good policy. Seems to be my the better path forward for me.
It's probably all about the 2028 Democrat presidential primary, and
that's what this is, right? I mean, honestly,
Trump.
Chris mentioned, what are they gaining? We know what they're gaining. The more they can sow this discord, they blame it on Republicans, they blame it on Trump. They want fear. As a matter of fact, that's a great transition to our next topic. That's what Democrats want. That's what Pritzker wants, is to create fear here, because then they can put that at the feet of Republicans and Trump and everybody else and say, look, it's their fault. It's their fault that in Little Mexico or whatever neighborhood you might want to point to, people are afraid to come out of their houses. It's Trump's fault. It's not our fault. It's not our policy's faults. And they did this, just recently, and it came back to bite them when there was a report. Chicago Public Schools freaked out and said, ICE is here, but we stopped them. Don't worry. And then, of course, Brandon Johnson jumped on that. Jake Pritzker jumped on that and put out, well, it turns out it was actually the Secret Service, because a threat had been made against an elected official, and so Secret Service was there to investigate. But, of course, you don't see any retraction from J.B. Pritzker, because his goal was to sow discord and to sow fear. And so it didn't matter if it was true or not. What mattered was that this was yet another opportunity for them to push their agenda and make people afraid, and then, of course, blame Republicans for it, when this wasn't us making people afraid. This was Pritzker and Johnson and the Democrats unnecessarily freaking everybody out over what was a Secret Service matter, not an ICE matter.
Yeah, the most egregious part, aside from Pritzker, who, like you said earlier, talks out of both sides of his mouth, was, there's no other word to describe it, but the totally unhinged way that the Chicago media was just going after this story with little to no facts. Earlier, I was looking it up. So there was, whether it's the Tribune, ABC7, whatever, we're all over this story. Tribune reporter had 2 tweets saying that I showed up at CPS. One of the tweets had 1.3 million views. The other tweet had 1 million views. Her follow-up tweets to correct the story, one has 10,000 views, one has 52,000 views. You guys are clearly chasing a narrative here. No one cares about your retraction, because you barely care about your retraction. The same reporter then went on to speak at CNN and other national news programs. It just so happens that every single time that the media makes a mistake on a story, it's chasing their own narrative in a way to make the Trump administration or Homan or law enforcement the bad guys. There was also no follow-ups with this principal. Say it was ICE. Say it was ICE showing up at the school. At what lengths will this principal go to protect someone in her school building that could potentially be a criminal on top of being an illegal immigrant? There was no follow-ups whatsoever as to what lengths Chicago Public Schools will go to potentially protect criminals that are in their schools. Yep. It was just completely ridiculous. And then I think you mentioned it in your lead up as well. This happened on Friday, and previous day was when we found out and got all the facts on the illegal immigrant that killed those 2 young women from the Chicago suburbs. There was I barely even saw it. I had a friend send it to me. Did you see this? I never even saw it. Very little concern for those 2 young women's lives and the policies, other than a made up story that the entire Chicago press corps ran with.
Well, and there was a statement put out by a immigration organization that was advocating for it, and they said one raid is one too many, is their whole thing. And it's like, well, okay, but if you're raiding for violent criminals, then maybe that one's not too many. But for them, it's not worth it no matter what. But as you said, who are we protecting and who are we not protecting here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
I will quickly give kudos because I'm sure he'll be mentioned a lot in our Con of the Week segment, but one kudos to Brandon Johnson. JB Pritzker didn't retract, but at least Johnson had the guts to say we were wrong on this. I mean, he did it in his roundabout sort of approach, and of course, in the process, blamed colonists and all the other garbage he likes to do. But he at least did admit he was wrong, which Pritzker has never had the guts to do and didn't hear. So I will give kudos to Brandon Johnson on that.
I mean, I think everybody agrees. Like, you want ICE going into a high school or a middle school to be like a last resort. Like, that's not ideal. Like, obviously the other students there are going to be intimidated or scared based on that happening. But I saw a report from CNN this week where they were talking about how ICE is aware of MS-13 gang members that are enrolled in high schools across the country, and they're actively recruiting within the high schools. Odds are that's probably not happening in a Chicago school, but I'm sure that there are, high schools in California, Texas, Arizona, places like that where that is happening. So you don't want to have this hard and fast rule where ICE cannot be in communication with, the education system whatsoever. But the Democrats and liberals and Pritzker and people like that want to make ICE's job as difficult as possible. That's kind of their, status quo. Like, that's their goal.
Well, I mean, Nicole's thing is common sense, and I think yet again it goes into this here where it's like, okay, why does it have to be one extreme or the other? Why is it we can never go into schools or let's raid all the schools? I mean, the reality is, as you said, Michael, let's do it carefully. Let's approach these situations with an approach that is very hyper focused instead of just a one size fits all approach, because that never works. I mean, it's a common sense approach, but it's either you're for raiding everywhere and anywhere all days, all every day of the week, or you're for no raids ever, and we can't ever go and enforce the law. It's like, well, okay, but most Americans, proven by poll after poll after poll, fit in this very large middle section.
Yeah, I like what the point that you brought up with Brandon Johnson, apologizing. Okay, I got it wrong. There's something to be said. I'm a former reporter. There's something to be said about responsible reporting, right? No matter your party lines, you owe it to your viewers to report responsibly and factually. And what I see more horrifying than any of this is us literally getting away from that. I know I wouldn't be okay reporting a false story. And if I did, I would be the first to apologize for it. We're starting to get into some territory that I find is even more concerning. And that's, letting your party dictate how you report a story. And I think that's dangerous, and not just in this topic. We're seeing it all across the board. And I would like to call for, getting back to responsible reporting and sticking to facts.
I mean, tribalism in our politics has hurt us badly, and now it's reached the media, and not now. It's been this way for a while now, but where it's just if it's your team, you jump on it, So it's our team is against Trump on immigration, so this must be true. We don't even have to fact check it. It's like, you know what? If even Rich Miller at Cat Facts is calling you out, you probably screwed up pretty badly here, because he's also on that team, and yet he even said, "Dude, chill out. Maybe pick up the phone and make sure it's accurate." So like, just because it's your team, just because the narrative fits your personal narrative or your personal politics and you're a member of the media or a public official, verify it first, because let's let the facts dictate the situation. What's that saying? These people never want to let facts get in the way of a good story. Well, guess what? You need to. It's your job if you represent any segment of the public. Let's go to the final topic here on immigration. I want to give kudos to the Senate Republicans here. They've been putting the pressure on Democrats on fulfilling their promises. Pritzker has said, and other Democrats, that we support removing violent criminals, and so a number of Senate Republicans have said, okay, then put your money where your mouth is. There's a move. I think it's here. Let me read it. Senate Bill 1313, which would require state law enforcement agencies to cooperate with ICE, ensuring undocumented immigrants charged with or convicted of a felony are identified, reported, and deported. There's a few others that was filed by Neil Anderson. I know Terry Bryant, Andrew Chesney have other bills that would repeal the Trust Act entirely. Either way, though, regardless of where you might stand on this, you've got multiple efforts by Republicans in the Senate on what is a really strong issue for us, as I've shown now with 2 weeks straight in polling. This is a strong issue for Republicans, and so kudos to the Senate Republicans for jumping on that and increasing the pressure down in Springfield on this tough issue for Democrats, because they actually need to step up and do the right thing. They've been unwilling to do it, so light a fire. So kudos to Anderson, Bryant, Chesney, and anybody else who's involved with this effort on the Senate Republican team.
Well, and I know Chris will like this comment, but I think this goes to show how out of touch the Bruce Rauner administration was, because Bruce Rauner signed the Trust Act, which prohibits law enforcement from communicating with ICE. And then here we are, 7, 8 years later, well, less than that. I mean, it's 2025, so it's probably only been 5 or 6 years since that bill has been signed. And 87% of Americans believe or agree with the Trump administration that violent criminals should be deported. So Bruce Rauner set us up for this, and Pritzker's just coasting on it.
If it was Rauner, it would have had to have been more than 6 years. I think it's 2017, so that would
was it 19 when they passed this? I think maybe
2017.
I think it was 17. Yeah, because I remember Trump.
Either way, we're not a history class here. We can move on. So, ultimately, listen, you're right. We're facing, the penalty of previous actions or inactions. It all comes back to roost. And when politicians make a play for votes, it tends to come around and bite us in the butt. Like, pensions, for instance, which I know we'll be talking about a lot in 2025. We like to, say, hey, let's go to give a giveaway over here to get some more votes. And then turns out our kids and grandkids got to pay for that giveaway. In this case, the Trust Act gets passed. And I think we all said it back when it happened. There were some aspects of the bill that were favorable, some that were unfavorable, but as politicians in Illinois like to do, it's not sit at the table and come up with a bipartisan, comprehensive piece of common sense legislation. It's ram through our agenda, and good luck to you if you disagree. And that was what happened with the Trust Act, and now we're paying the price. I mentioned Senate Republicans. I need to make sure I also mention Jason Plummer. I don't know if he's involved with this legislation, but he has been really strongly calling out the governor on the situation with ICE and the Secret Service up in Chicago. So kudos to Plummer as well. I'm trying to be really positive in 2025 and give kudos to everybody I possibly can. So working at it. All right, enough immigration talk. Let's move to the next thing. So House Republicans have turned their focus to gerrymandering in Illinois. I think we can all agree, whether we agree or disagree that this push is going to succeed, we can all agree that this map that we're all looking at, that we have to deal with this decade, is one of the worst gerrymandering things we've ever seen in the history of gerrymandering in the whole country, let alone just Illinois. So the House Republicans have decided to bring it back up several years after it was put in place. They've filed a new lawsuit. They've launched a couple websites, redoremap.com if you want to check it out. It also has ilhouseGOP.org/redistricting, but it's easier just to remember redo remap, which is, I'm guessing, why they did it. If you want to see more information on this, if you want to get involved with their effort, Chris, I know you've got strong feelings on whether or not the lawsuit's actually going to succeed. So I'll pass it to you first on this one.
Oh, thanks for throwing me under the bus, Collin. Appreciate that. No, I mean, I think, like you said, Collin, this is a great idea, and I would love to change the map so I can not be in Justin Slaughter's House district anymore, because that would be nice if I actually got to see my state rep every once in a while. But at the same time, is that going to happen? Probably not, because all these things are kind of baked in at this point. And if you're going to challenge a map on the basis of it being gerrymandered, you kind of have to do it right after the fact that the map was passed and not wait a couple cycles before you do that. Again, I think this might be a great political statement for the House Republican caucus to make. You can certainly get a little bit of mileage out of the fact that Democrats drew bad maps, which they did, and you're kind of getting the shaft politically because of that, which is true. I don't disagree with that. Is this going to be successful? No, but you never know. It is the golden age of America. Maybe this will finally hit the U.S. Supreme Court, and then the wave of Trumpism will rain from the heavens, and we will get a new legislative map of the state of Illinois, and then we'll get them all around the country, and then Republicans will never lose. And, maybe we'll all go off to, Candyland, Fairyland at the same time or something like that. A boy can dream.
Yeah, I mean, listen, again, we can all agree, as Ryan Spain and others have said here, the process was certainly, I think he said, not just a little corrupt. You could call it cheating, you can call it whatever you want. It's all true. And so now the question is, number one, is this going to be an effective legal strategy? I don't know. I'm dubious just because the Illinois Supreme Court is not favorable to us with the majority that Democrats have there. Then the question is it a good PR strategy? That's where, I personally, I don't know, because I just don't think that these kind of narratives work in Illinois. The voters don't care how you do it as long as you make their lives better. So they don't really care when the Democrats cheat. They should, but they don't. However, this is my caveat. I've always said your time between elections is your time to make people care about something. So if this was election season, I would say this is a mistake. Voters don't care about this, but it's not election season. And so if the House Republicans want to go out and if they think they can move the needle and make people care about this so that the time we get to the next election, this can become a campaign issue, you know what? I'm not going to judge them for trying. Wouldn't be my avenue to go, but you know what? Maybe they're smarter than me here and maybe they've got a better plan. But this is your time to educate the public. And it seems like that's part of their plan here because they're putting a big PR push on this. So this is definitely going to be a major initiative.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think as legislators, our job's not only to serve our community, but it's also to educate our voters on right and wrong. And this is bad for democracy, right? But it is our job, all of us involved in civic duties, if you will, to educate our voters and our constituents about bad things that really affect them. This is one of those things. The Democrats are really good at telling people what they should care about, right? For instance, in my district, in my, when I was just running my campaign, they said abortion is going to be the issue in this district, right? They kept saying it and they kept saying it. Well, I'm at the doors myself, and this isn't even coming up. But then towards the end, it's not an issue until it is because they're being told this is the issue. So I think we should be doing a better job of being like, hey, this actually really is an issue. This is something that you should learn about. That website is great. I actually literally just went on the website for the first time today. It's great. It's interesting. It's thought-provoking. And this is something that I think that, is it going to go somewhere? Probably not this year or next year, but it puts the thought process in people's minds who are really interested in making sure their voices are heard. And so I think if we approach it in that way, if we approach it in a smart way and we approach it in a way that is easy to kind of get behind, I think we can probably start to make some movements on it.
Well, listen, I always want to be balanced, and I will say that in the last couple of weeks, McCombie's press team and a couple other members of the House have finally used the phrase cost of living for the first time in forever, and I'm so proud they did. So I'm going to then give a little, since they took a little.
Hey, that's on all my flyers, so just so you know.
Why do you think you're on this podcast? You're one of the good ones. No, ultimately, listen, there's different times in the cycle. During election season, you cannot educate voters. It's impossible. And so you have to do that education outside of election season. If I'm going to educate voters, I'd probably pick something a little more strong, like maybe tie this into corruption. So this is part of corruption. It's not the thing. Corruption's the thing. Again, I've been on record saying don't talk about corruption, but that was during election season. We're now off season. So now you could maybe try to force voters to care about certain things. The problem is, again, I've seen, not a lot of people agree with this, but I've seen in the polls, I've seen in my research, in the state of Illinois, it's like New Jersey, it's like Louisiana, that the voters just, in the end of the day, they don't care how you do it. They don't care if you're corrupt. They should. They just don't. Unless you're Tiffany Henyard in Thornton Township, they just don't tend to care. You could go raise down Meigs Field. You could be Lou Presta, whoever else down in your region, buddy, down there, Chris.
He won re-election.
Yeah.
He won re-election.
Shouldn't be this
can
way.
do, Collin.
And maybe it's the House Republicans who will finally turn that around because it shouldn't be this way. But ultimately, it's so ingrained in us in Illinois. I don't know that we're going to be able to change it. But you know what? If the House Republicans want to try, you lose 100% of the shots you don't take. So kudos to them. Give it a shot. Hopefully they'll poll this and they'll test this because if it isn't working after a couple months, I hope they'll have the ability to say, you know what, fine, we tried it didn't work, versus just riding this all the way through next November, even if it's not working. But hey, give it a shot. Let's see if it works.
Collin, can I just say something on that too? Because I think that the timing has a big part of it. I mean, I originally agreed that the same thing, they should have done it right away. I was glad to see it done now, but I think it shifted from that political aspect. And if they were to do it immediately, it would have been that political cry of, they mapped out Republicans and we didn't get our fair shake of it. And now I actually think, to Chris's point, it's more about representation. I mean, I'm seeing now, I was mapped out in my district, and now there's only 2 precincts in my municipality that's with the current representative and senator, so I feel like I'm not represented anymore. And I think that's the shift of the message from the political piece being earlier, if they were to catch it, where now they have the opportunity to actually bring it more to the public of your representation is not there. So I'm glad to see it. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
I mean, ironically, the legal explanation is going to be completely different than the PR explanation. The legal arguments here are that, hey, Democrats admitted that they drew these districts on partisanship. And so now that they've admitted it, let's take that to the state courts where that argument could possibly work. And so the legal argument will be different. To your point, Carolyn, the public argument is good government representation, which is, we can all agree, whether you're gerrymandering for Republicans or for Democrats, it's bad government when politicians pick their voters. And so it'll be interesting where they, the arguments being made by their lawyers will be maybe a little different than the arguments being made by their communications professionals. But you know what? That's politics. That's how this all works. All right, let's go to the next thing here. Let's move on to, a COGFA report. I want to pull this up because I don't want to screw it up. So give me a second to, I should have had this up already. But if you want to see some good information, it's deep, it's in depth, and sometimes difficult to follow. But COGFA, we call it COGFA by short. It's the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability. They are nonpartisan. They are a government agency who focuses on putting out information on our financial position in the state. And they put out a report that's pretty hefty. It's 70 pages long, about where we are in the state compared to the other states in the country on tax rates, tax revenues, government spending, and employment trends. And I think this is pretty fascinating, and I think it proves a few key things. I want to say, again, this is the second time I'm going to say this in one episode here, but I do want to give kudos. The fact that Rich Miller and CatFax actually posted this, considering it runs against a lot of the arguments that his allies like to make. You know what? That took a little guts to do. So kudos to him. Let's run through just some of these that was what this report points out. I'm going to do it really quick because I don't want to be here for an hour reading this thing, but I just want to do some of the highlights here on where Illinois ranks on some of these categories. We are 13th highest in the country on the tax revenue that we bring in, 16th highest on the individual income tax revenue that we bring in, 6th highest on the corporate net income tax revenue we bring in. We are 31st on sales tax. So to be fair, we are lower on sales tax, which I know we've had conversations about over the years. We are 19th highest on tobacco tax, 17th highest on alcohol tax, 13th highest on motor fuel tax, 5th highest on motor vehicle tax. We are 47th out of 50 when it comes to our insurance premium tax revenue. So that's lower than average. We are 15th highest on tax revenue as a percent of personal income, 8th highest on local government tax revenue, 6th highest on property tax revenue. All right, I've done enough here on revenues. Let me move down to expenditures. 18th highest in per capita expenditures, 6th highest in elementary and secondary education expenditures by state and local governments. You don't hear that a lot, that we're 6th highest there. We are 8th highest in police expenditures, only 38th highest on corrections, 15th highest on local government expenditures for housing and community development, 7th highest on parks and recreation. All right, you're getting the point. That's enough. Please pull up that report if you really want to see more. It's CGFA.il.gov. Lane's brought up on screen and post an image of the front of that report. You can search for it if you'd like. Lots of helpful information in there. And we're not even talking about the unemployment information, which shows that we are 47th, 48th, 49th in the country in almost every category when it comes to unemployment, in the sense that we are worst on unemployment. But the key point here is that Illinois is a high-tax state, we are a high-spend state, and we are low on employment. That is not a recipe for long-term financial success. So I want to open it up. I'm sure you all have thoughts on that, but here you have a government report proving what a lot of us have said, which is, yeah, we tax a lot, and you know what? We spend a lot. What are you getting for that money? I think that's the crux of it. A lot of people are like, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm okay with the high taxes. We've seen that in some polls. I hate it, but we've seen it. But you know what? We're not getting enough for it. It's too expensive to live here, and we're not getting the support we need. If we're going to pay high taxes, then I want the best services in the country, and that's not what we're getting for those high taxes. We're seeing it. Tax and spend policies are what's happening down in Springfield, and their own report just proved it. What do you guys think?
I'll start. I took a quick look at that too, and I didn't go real in depth, but I had the same conclusion that, we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem, and it's spending in the wrong places, obviously, because if you looked at that report, I mean, we were really weak in corrections, housing and community development, public welfare, highways. I mean, those are areas where we really should be spending our money to get the most out of it and protect our communities and, really flourish within them. So, and those are where we're weakest. So obviously it's where we're spending the money. That's the problem.
Yeah, I didn't mention that. 22nd in the country on what we're spending on highways. So you're right. I mean, I think investing in our infrastructure is a path towards long-term success, and we're not doing that. At least not to the level that we're taxing. If we're up here on taxes, then we want services up here too. And as you just said, on some of the key things, it's not happening. Anybody else have thoughts, or is this just so in the weeds? I know I always get people come back to me, don't do the policy stuff, but if we're not providing educational and helpful information to our audience, then what the heck are we doing here? So, it may bore people, but I got to slip a little bit of this in here.
I'm a policy nerd. I know people don't think that, but I love it. So I read this too. I mean, I couldn't wait to get my hands on this. I obviously didn't need a report, though, to tell me that we're overtaxed and underperforming. We live it, right? We see it. I mean, this severely hinders our economic growth as well. And, not to mention the horrible regulatory climate we have. I mean, this is great. We have this report. It confirms what we already know. What do we do? Right. So that's what I'm interested in. What's the action now?
Well, I think, listen, again, when Rich posted this, he said people should be looking at this as a cheat sheet. And I think if I'm down in Springfield, I'm not you, Nicole. I'm not really great at policy. I try, and sometimes I fake it. And so to me, I'm looking at something like this. Okay, you know what? We're sixth in whatever taxes. Are we sixth in what we're getting for that? Like, I'm looking at like that kind of a balance. Look around the country. I mean, one of the greatest things about the United States of America is that we're this testing ground for policies. There's 49 other states that are trying things, and some things are working and some things are not. And so I love these comparisons. Where are we compared to these other states on the services we're providing, what we're spending, where we're spending it, how we're taxing? It's really instructional, I think. And I hope that our policymakers will take that advice and be looking at this report and look at those comparisons, because I think the data speaks for itself. In some areas, we are taxing too much. In some areas, maybe like sales tax, maybe you could balance that out a little bit. In some areas, we are not spending enough. In some areas, we're spending too much. I mean, this could be really instructional as we look at what could be as much as a $3+ billion deficit this year and even worse in future years. This is the kind of data you got to be looking at to make sure we make the right choices.
Yeah, I think Carolyn, you were right on the head too. Prioritizing, right? It's prioritizing where we're spending. And I mean, obviously, most of where we live, I can't speak for everybody, but I know in my district, property taxes are way too high. I have seniors literally crying in my office, and it breaks my heart. So it's not necessarily, we're not going to get rid of that problem of high taxes. We're going to have them for a little bit, but it's prioritizing, where do we start? Who can we get on board with this? Maybe we can get the schools on board with us. Maybe we can, start to get municipalities on board. Maybe bringing back some more funding for our municipalities, from us to start lessening these burdens that we're seeing in our homes.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned it. I mean, I'll go back to that section of the report. We're sixth in the country, and highest in the Midwest on local government property tax revenue. So it is. Property taxes are a huge burden for families. And when we talk about the cost of living that is driving down families and making them struggle, the working families in the state, property taxes are certainly a big part of that.
And a correlation to that is, it really stood out, and you made mention to it, Collin, about the 48th in the unemployment rate. And it always baffles me as to, we are one of the largest urbanized areas in the country. We have the best freight system in the country. We have one of the leading healthcare systems in the country, yet we're one of the worst in unemployment. I mean, I don't understand that.
Yeah. I mean, there's no excuse for it. You look through some of this, and I'll say some of these numbers, okay, I can accept some of these numbers, but you get down to the employment section, the many benefits we have in this state, being the center of the Midwest, and I hate these ads, but the middle of everything. But it's true when it comes to our economic benefits. We are the railroad capital, the railway rail line capital in the world. We have got multiple international airports. Ports, we've got two major rivers, we've got the Great Lakes, we just have so many economic benefits, the massive amounts of farmland and manufacturing, and it's just, there is no excuse for us being that horrible in pretty much every economic indicator. And we often pay the price for that horrible standing.
Yeah, I would just add too, to make matters worse, we're comparing ourselves to other states. Missouri's governor just announced that he wants to completely phase out the income tax altogether. Kim Reynolds in Iowa is cutting, they moved to a flat tax and are cutting that. Same thing with Indiana. It's kind of one of those like unfortunate like Stockholm syndrome things in Illinois, where there's no appetite to cut spending or cut taxes. I have some friends in Indiana who like every year get their reimbursement check from the government, and they're like, "Oh yeah, sweet! Like got a couple extra $100 this year," and that's like normal to them. Where for us, like it's normal, completely trying to like stave off like any tax increases. So it's just one of those things that like as bad as things are getting here, they're getting better elsewhere, which just drives people, businesses, families, everything further away from Illinois.
Well, and Katie, you've got a great national sort of exposure with all the work that you do, so you see that comparison. What always drives me crazy is you can make any number mean anything. I'm a messaging guy. I can make any number mean anything. Anybody with their salt, like Pritzker's Comm Shop, they're pretty good at what they do. They can make any number mean anything, and so they'll point out all these great economic indicators, or we got an increase in our credit rating. But what they don't point out, and the media doesn't care to ever dig one layer deep, is we went up this much, and the whole rest of the country went up that much. Being 48th, and we stayed at 48th. It wasn't like, hey, we went up and now we're 46th. We went up a little, everyone else went up a lot. And this is what keeps happening as the whole rest of the country has been rebounding from COVID. And as they've been seeing more, pro-growth policies, they're growing at a significantly faster rate. They're making significant improvements. We're making small improvements. And the governor and his team and the Democrats are like, look at these small improvements. And everyone's like, yeah, everything's getting a little better. And for those of us who, dig just one layer deep, we're like, yeah, but for everyone else in the country, it's getting a lot better. So you're happy with your crumbs, but it could be so much better.
Yeah, there's a little bit of like a culture shock when you talk to other like politicos in different states. We were talking with people from Missouri yesterday, and I didn't follow their governor's race that closely, but apparently Kehoe was like the more moderate candidate of the three. And they're like, okay, well, the new moderate in Missouri means completely eliminating the income tax and universal school choice. Yep. That's moderate in Missouri. Yep. So it's just like a little bit of like a culture shock to like Republicans here.
we did some polling, and I was shocked by just sort of where what the Overturn window, or where all that has sort of shifted, and it's most of the country. But here in Illinois, we continue to be all about the crumbs. I mean, I'd love to see somebody run on just that idea of you deserve better. Just give people that eye-opening experience of it could be so much better in this state. And you know what? The residents of the state deserve it. They are the hardest working people, not just in the Midwest. They deserve better, and yet for whatever reason, our politicians and the media have convinced them that this is the best that they deserve, and it's just not true. They deserve so much more. All right, let's keep moving along. Chris, this is down in your neck of the woods, but I've been watching this a little bit. You can educate us a lot more, but there is a big battle going on in Homer Township between two Republican slates. If you don't know it, February 25th, which is just 3.5 weeks after the time of this current recording, there's a primary in any of your townships or your municipalities that have partisan primaries. So not a lot of the state, but some regions, including Homer Township. That's coming up pretty soon. And there are two Republican slates, one of which is being actively backed by the Homer Township Democratic Organization, pushing their people to vote for one slate because they hate Steve Balich that much that they want to knock him out. Chris, what's going on down there?
So oftentimes people ask me, Chris, how did you get so cranky? Why are you losing your hair at the age of 25? How are you so handsome despite all of that? These are the questions people ask me on the street. But oftentimes I answer the question with, Homer Township politics has ruined my life. It is something I've been involved in to some one degree or another for the last 4 years. And every cycle, and Nicole might not want to get into the details of this, but I think she'll agree with this point of every cycle it gets worse. Every cycle it gets stupider. And this time we have the creme de la creme. And that is the Homer Township Democratic Organization openly telling their people to request Republican permanent vote by mail ballots in order to vote in the Republican primary for Homer Township Supervisor. And funnily enough, in the Facebook post where they posted this and told all their people to hashtag boot Balich and a hashtag ballot bunch and vote for the Homer Township reset candidates, they included the line of no, comma, we have not lost our minds. So this is how serious of a situation this is. And it's honestly surprising. Now, they've done similar things like this before. I recall working on a judge race in 2022 that involved Homer Township, where the Homer Township Democratic Precinct committeemen were on Facebook telling people to pull Republican ballots, vote for the other guy because the organization had endorsed the other guy. It was a whole thing. So they've done this type of thing before, but they've never officially used the Homer Township Democratic Organization's platform to endorse the one Republican slate against the other Republican slate. And to that, I say thank you, because it just made, everybody's job who was supporting Steve a lot easier, because you just gave us great ammunition to say that, hey, these other guys, they're endorsed by the Homer Township Democratic Organization. So all you did was shoot your guys, your favorable party team in the foot. And thank you for making me lose even more of my hair at the age of 25, because Homer Township politics is stupid. But for some reason, I'm a masochist, and I keep coming back.
We keep making fun of Pritzker for lying, but Chris saying he's 25. I want to see the paperwork there. I want to see a birth certificate.
Yeah, I have to. I mean, obviously, I'm from Homer Glen. He's not wrong when he says every year I'm just impressed. The word is impressed with how it gets out of hand. We have good candidates. We have smart candidates. We have a great community. That all being said, when you're heading into a primary, you're going to approach that a little bit different than you will for a general, right? At least where I live. That is, you're primary minded, you're general minded. We're heading into a primary. I can't help but feel like this is a little bit like the Green Bay Packers choosing the new head coach for the Chicago Bears. I just feel like, trying to just stay light about this and laugh about this because I live here too, but it just doesn't feel right. But yeah, I've seen that. I actually, I try not to stay on these village pages. Someone actually asked me my opinions on this. Nothing surprises me anymore in Homer Glen.
Thank God it's not your clown
So
show.
true.
Right? That's
So true.
Chris, I think, Chris, you wanted the Bears to hire Mike McCarthy. You were very sad when we chose more wisely than that.
It'll still be, you guys are still in the same perpetual loop that you guys are going to suck forever. So I don't care who you hired as head coach. Mike McCarthy would have just been hilarious.
McCarthy would have been bad. I'm optimistic about Johnson, but I like that analogy, Nicole. That was good.
I felt like Chris would like it, and I'm not. I want to say this for anyone from Homer Glen watches. I'm not making fun of the political climate. I take it very seriously. It's getting out of hand. I would like to see it stop. The bullying is bad. The name calling is bad. The doxing, it's all bad. So a joking set aside, I think we need to get back to serving our community.
It was a good clarification. I mean, listen, I would say, Chris, you're right. This was just dumb tactics by the Democratic Party. I mean, all you did was hurt the candidates you wanted to help. Plus, you've now had a bunch of Democrats who are now going to be listed as Republicans and maybe on the Republican vote by mail list, where they're going to get a Republican ballot in the next primary because they don't even know that that's what they've signed up for permanently. So just they've created all sorts of problems for themselves. I'm kind of struck by this. What were to happen if a Republican organization were to say, hey, in this other race over here, there's two Democratic slates. Here's the one that's more towards our side, that's more conservative. You should vote for them. I mean, it would be this big uproar. Republicans, how dare you say to support Democrats? I think sometimes tactically, I wish we would be a little bit more, chess playing instead of checkers playing. If I'm going to go in a deep blue area, I'd rather have a conservative Democrat or a moderate Democrat. But, that I get attacked for, and I've done it. I've supported plenty of center right or more moderate or conservative Democrats in deep blue areas because that's a step in the right direction. And then I get all the time, Collin has supported a Democrat. Well, yeah, it's an 80% Democratic district, and I helped get a moderate elected. Of course I'm going to do that. It's moving in our direction. I think sometimes we could learn tactically to be a little smarter. And I think, you know what, while the Democrats did this badly, I would say to our people who are watching this, learn from it. You can be involved. Number one, you should be involved in local politics. Stop being so afraid to go out there and point out to your voters which candidates are more conservative and which candidates are more liberal in a municipal election. Democrats are going after us in the municipals. You better be involved too. That's number one. And number two, when you don't have candidates, if you're in more of a deeper blue area, then still get involved. Find those candidates who, yeah, maybe they're Democrats, but they're more conservative or more moderate. That's a step in the right direction. You can move the ball in our direction. We don't have to always be so worried about getting involved and maybe someone's not going to like it. Well, you know what? Let's do the right thing and be smart tactically.
I also think it's just, you don't have to vote on Slate. Like there's nothing that says you've got to vote for all these candidates and all these. Do your research, do your homework. Who do you align with? Who do you like? I think we forget about that sometimes in these smaller races, and that goes along. Meet the candidates, have conversations, I want to see more involvement on that.
Yeah, I love it. Our final topic, it's going to be a bit of a fun one, just because it's conjecture. But you know what? The rumor mill was lit on fire in this past week. Juliana Stratton has launched a federal PAC. Everybody was talking about what might happen in 2026. Does Durbin run or does he not? Does Pritzker run or does he not? Maybe Pritzker runs for Senate, or maybe he just steps out and runs for governor. In none of these iterations that people were talking about was anyone saying, maybe Juliana Stratton would run for Senate instead of even being running for governor or being Pritzker's next light gov. No one was talking about that, or if they were, it was very quietly. This was not on most people's or if anybody's radar. And so everyone's like, what the heck does this mean? Because a federal PAC has to raise money that's hard cash. So it's a heck of a lot harder to raise money. Very few people are going to raise hard money and then spend it on a state race, because that's just frankly a waste. And so if you've got a federal PAC, you're going to spend that on a federal race, which means running for Senate, or I don't know which congressional district she's in. Maybe it's a run for Congress. But ultimately, again, this has got a lot of people wondering, wait, what is Juliana Stratton doing? And does this mean Pritzker's going to run again? So have some fun with this. What rumor do you all want to jump on top of? This is just have some fun. No one wants to go first. Sheesh. Michael, be the sacrificial lamb here, buddy.
Well, I mean, we were all kind of hearing, maybe Pritzker's going to run for U.S. Senate and Juliana Stratton's going to run for governor instead. And that rumor was kind of going around for a little bit. But this development with her, establishing this federal PAC is a real curveball. I mean, I know we've talked on previous episodes about how she just isn't the best candidate to run statewide because of some of the statements she's made and some of the positions that she's taken. So, I mean, go for it, Juliana. We'll see you in November if that's what you want to do.
When you even see it in the narrative, like the messaging she's putting out, a few other people noted this, that it's the Pritzker Stratton administration. She makes sure to tie herself really strongly to Pritzker. And again, that's not accidental. This group does not do anything accidental. So what that means, I don't yet know, but it's certainly not an accident that that's being done.
Well, it could also be like Pritzker, like, hey, why don't you go over here and do this? And then he can pick a new lieutenant governor.
It's possible. But then that means he's running again, which,
yeah.
A lot of people have put out conjecture that they think he might not be running again. Chris, what are your thoughts?
I had people text me and call me after this news came out. They're like, the Republicans are going to beat anybody. It's Juliana Stratton. The Senate might be the play. And my response to them is, you expect the Illinois Republican Party to raise hard federal dollars to the tune of millions and millions of them for a statewide U.S. Senate race? No, thank you, sir. I will eat my hat if I actually see that happen. But again, as I say, every time such topics are brought up, I would like you to bring me either the press release or the obituary of Senator Dick Durbin before I make any comments on who's running for what position.
Yeah, and well, you've noted in the past how Pritzker and Durbin are not friends, and so I had somebody mention to me yesterday at a thing that I was at that maybe this is, Juliana Stratton setting up a run to primary Dick if he doesn't get out. And Pritzker's like, you know what? You're 80s years old. It's time to go away. So either retire or I'm going to run Stratton against you. I'm not saying that's the case here, but someone shared that yesterday as their thought, and it's not entirely crazy.
I would just say there's like a general lack of talent, a lack of a bench for Illinois Democrats. I mean, I think partly that's because they are rarely ever challenged, whether electorally or from the media. Pritzker, in my personal opinion, is really yet to, I mean, he thinks he can run for president. I mean, he's never been challenged in his life when it comes to media or, politics. So it must be nice to be a Democrat in Illinois. You could really fail upwards very quickly. I'd like to mention too, I don't know if you guys saw, Kwame Raoul was doing an interview on CNN recently, and every time he speaks, like I cannot believe how untalented he is. Like during the entire interview, he's staring at his computer, like reading off like his script for what he's doing. So it's him, Juliana Stratton. I think we could tell that Susana Mendoza and probably Alexi Janulius are gunning for Chicago mayor. So I think it just kind of shows they're not really talented. They don't have this giant bench of just, these generational leaders that maybe they think they are. So it's just a little interesting to see their little tap dance, what they do the next couple of years.
And Katie, you're not wrong. I mean, I'll mention some names in a second because there's a few extra names I'll throw in there. But you have a very good point that most of these people are not battle tested. I mean, Alexi would be on that list, but the hardest race he had was when he ran against Kirk and lost. You mentioned Kwame Raoul. He's never had a tough election, and while he thinks he's the next Obama, nobody else actually thinks that. You mentioned Juliana Stratton hasn't had a tough race. And you mentioned Susana Mendoza. I mean, when she actually had a tough race, when she ran for mayor of Chicago, she got blown out. Raja hasn't had to face a tough challenge, and he's on this list of potentially being open to this and wanting to run. Lauren Underwood has had some tough races, so she's a little bit battle tested, and she has expressed interest in the Senate race. Robin Kelly hasn't really been tested. Delia Ramirez hasn't really been tested. These are some of the names that are being bandied about. So I think they've got in their bench. I think it's a mile wide and an inch deep is the way I would describe it. I think there's a lot of names on there, but are they battle tested? Not so much. Now, Chris, I mean, you're our eternal pessimist, and your point about, will we be able to beat them in a statewide race where you got to raise millions at a few $1,000s a pop? It's going to be a challenge, certainly, but it's not like it's an insurmountable challenge, just a difficult one.
Yeah, I was going to say, does that matter? I don't know that they're not these generational talents, but it's worth mentioning.
Yeah.
I have to give props, JB Pritzker's staff, their comm staff, the senior staff, they're really good at their jobs. As someone who has studied communications, was a press secretary, they are great at messaging.
Annoying.
It's annoying because I have to say, when they come out with something, I'm like, damn, that's good. That's good stuff. And, I think it's not going to matter so much who that candidate is going to be. Are they going to be marketable? Are they going to be able to message for them? Are they going to be able to be likable? Those are things you can't beat, especially when you have such a solid messaging staff like JB does. So, talent is definitely something that they seem to know how to work with. Lack of talent, I should say, is something they know how to work with. But that is, staff, they are very good at what they do. And, I think
well, and Nicole, I don't know if you've seen, but I mentioned it a few weeks ago when they lost their top comm staffers, you saw a marked decrease in quality coming out of the governor's administration. I'm curious how much that's going to have an impact here, because he has had a top-notch staff, but he's had some losses in that staff over the last few months, which certainly may play in here.
Yeah, absolutely. For
I
sure.
mean, listen, in all of my private conversations, the giddiness you see in Republicans when they think about the idea that Juliana Stratton could be the Democratic nominee for governor, not Senate, as Chris said, but for governor, maybe that plays in here. Maybe Michael's not wrong here, that Pritzker wants to hold on to that governor's seat, whether he runs for it or not. And maybe Democrats are smart enough to know that Stratton isn't going to be the one to do it. So move her over to the Senate race, bring in a new light gov. Pritzker runs one more time and then passes the baton. Again, this is all conjecture. We're just having some fun. What we keep throwing out enough things, eventually one of them is going to end up being right. So then we look brilliant, right? All right, let's go to our final topic. I have abused the time of our guests and our team here enough. So our final topic is always the fun one. We have some fun with this. Our OG and Clown of the Week nominations. You don't have to make nominations if you don't want, but OG is someone you think deserves praise for something from this past week in politics. Ideally Illinois, but you can take it where you'd like. Clown of the Week is somebody who deserves scorn. You can nominate anyone or anything you'd like. Who has someone they'd like to pop in? There's no rules here. Do it in whatever order you want. Dump them all at once. I don't care. What do you got?
I was going to say for OG of the week, Senator Terry Bryant. She's really been fighting with Pritzker and the administration over some of this immigration enforcement stuff, which, as we talked about, the American people are on our side on this issue, and we need to continue taking advantage of it. And good luck to the Mount Vernon Police Department as they investigate whoever vandalized Terry Bryant's office.
Well,
That's
Michael, that's one of my clowns. It's whoever vandalized. It's Terry's office. I'm trying to find out my notes here. She also shares it with Dave Severin, as well. So whoever did that, listen, right or left, I don't care. Violence is never the answer. I'm on record. There's a video in our YouTube channel at Core where when somebody tried to burn down the Planned Parenthood, I said, stop it. Don't do that. I call violence out in politics, whether it's on my side or the other side of the aisle. Whoever threw this brick, it deserves a permanent Clown of the Week nomination, and I certainly hope they're caught.
Amen.
My OG of the week every week is Terry Bryant. I just want to agree. She's just so fun to watch. She is so good at what she does. But I'm gonna have to go a little bit, and I don't get in the habit of praising Dems very often. But our OG of the week has to be the new chief of staff, Clayton Harris, who actually walked through the hallways with a bell to make sure we were all on time at noon in the House chambers. It's never happened. So I mean. I thought we were under attack. I thought something was going on. It was brilliant, and kudos to him. It was really funny, and it worked. We were all there. So,
yeah, Nicole, I want to ask you in 2 or 3 months if you still think that's positive.
Yes, I'll let you know.
1 week. We're all a fan of it.
Yeah.
Who else has stuff they want to add?
I can go. I have both of mine. My clown of the week is the White House Office of Management and Budget. For putting out the freeze on all the federal grants without fully understanding the implications that it had, in particular to those with disabilities and veterans and substance abuse and mental health, being on a mental health board here in McHenry County, and also in the transportation realm and Medicaid, and it goes on and on, sending everyone into this tizzy of chaos and crisis and really having to reel that back. So I understand and I admire their quest for efficiencies and cost savings, but doing it like a bull in a china shop and tearing everything into pieces and trying to put it back together is really not the way of doing it. I wish they would have, chipped away and found that diamond in the proper way of actually handling that situation. So that's my clown and my OG.
Let me just real quick. Let me respond to that, because we're going to have people who watch this who are going to be like, tribalism. Trump did it. It's automatically okay. We got to be able to be objective and look at situations. The end goal of this certainly may be a positive one, but it's how you do things in politics that matters. And the way this was done handed Democrats an easy PR win that makes us look bad. So even if you support what the ultimate goal is, and even if you support Trump and the administration, we got to be able to admit, again, the goal of this podcast is what can we do better? How do we grow together? How this was done was a mistake. It gave the Democrats an easy PR win that they could hurt us with. And so again, it is not like we have to reflexively say that everything that the Trump administration does is perfect. They're human. They're going to make mistakes. Even they admitted that by pulling this back. We got to do better. There's so many opportunities to show the inefficiencies in government and the waste in government. So I applaud what they're trying to do, but we got to be smart about how we do it, because the media is not going to be our ally on that process. All right, go ahead, Carolyn.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100% on that one. And the OG goes to Senator McConchie. I didn't get to weigh in before, but he's done a fantastic job and has had his challenges and always handled them with empathy and grace. And just I wish him the best of luck with his new endeavors. Kudos to him for continuing on, and he's done so much for the disability community and now wanting to even bring that to another level. So definitely my OG for the week.
Awesome. Good choice.
My clown of the week, and anybody who knows me is think I'm gonna have lost it. But my clown of the week is Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, because this week the Randall, as some may call him, came out that he will vote against former Rep. Lori Chavez de Raymer, President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Labor. Now, here's the problem with this. I'm so sick and tired of the Republican Party getting their proverbial underwear in a nod every time the Republican Party moves to the left on a given issue. You know what? We put together one of the greatest political coalitions of all time to reelect President Donald J. Trump. And part of that was working people. Okay? Everybody's saying it on this podcast before, that the Republican Party is bringing in working class people, bringing in union members. And when President Trump tries to extend an olive branch to organized labor and working people across this country by appointing a moderate to the Department of Labor, well, Senator Rand Paul, he just can't have that. We've got to have national right to work. We got to shut down all these labor unions for one reason or another. And I like Rand Paul for a lot of reasons. One of them is not his labor policy. So, Senator Paul, you are the clown of the week. And I don't know, get better, dude. I don't know.
Okay. Chris, the only thing I'll say to that is it's not necessarily the moving left or moving right on policies. Some people have concerns over Trump's choice simply because of gig workers and the unionization of gig workers and independent contractors. That's what they've got a beef with. In fact, we're going to have a guest in a few weeks who's going to talk a lot about that. So a little foreshadowing there. Who else has clowns and OGs? Well, I try to figure out why it happens like once a week where I just suddenly go fuzzy.
I'll go with my clown of the week. My clown of the week was last Friday. The Chicago media just completely falling for a story that they believed and wanted to be true, that ICE was just invading public schools, terrorized children in neighborhoods. Just completely false, ridiculous. So then that leads my OG to be Tom Homan, who's just unafraid to go into any media interview and keeping American families safe. So kudos to him.
All right. I got a handful here. Let me go through. So I'll start with OGs. I like to be positive. So first, Chris, since our last recording, you had your anniversary at Core Strategies. You've been here with us for 4 years. So kudos, my buddy. Thanks for sticking with us and putting up with how we mistreat you way too often. Another OG here is Don Tracy. Whether you like him or dislike him, some people forget that he's actually been dealing with a legal situation for 5-6 years at this point, where people who are trying to come after him and come after Ronner said that he did something wrong, that he was accused of, at this point, it was a campaign contribution. They're saying that his wife made it on behalf of him and they couldn't prove it. Anyways, it's been in the courts for a long time. He finally got vindication. So kudos to Don Tracy. Opponents, people on the left were trying to come after him and Ronner for that. And there were no basis in fact, and it finally got proven in court. So kudos to him, and that's that. Next, I'm actually going to list 2 Democrats here because there's 2 bills that I like to see, and not common to give Democrats kudos here, but Yolanda Morris is going to get a kudos for me and my wife. House Bill 1603. Now, I haven't fully vetted this. I'm sure stuff's going to get added to it, and now suddenly we can't support it anymore. But as initially written, this would not allow people to deny housing to or refusing to rent to people based on the breed of their dog. Anybody like us who has any dog breed that has pit in them has faced this in the past, where a lot of people won't let you rent an apartment if you've got a part pit bull or a full pit bull. And our little boy is the cutest, sweetest little guy, and I'm sick and tired of people discriminating against that type of dog. So kudos on that bill. Again, we'll see where it goes, and we'll see if it gets worse, and suddenly I have to rescind my kudos. We'll see. And then Cam Buckner for House Bill 1894. I am sick and tired of Illinois being a state where if you post any image of your ballot, it is a felony. It's a class 4 felony in this state. I think it's total BS in the era of social media. He's filed a bill to make it no longer a felony to post. Listen, we want people to participate in democracy. Selfies are the thing nowadays. They've been for a long time. Let's encourage people to promote the fact that they're out there voting instead of discouraging it. So kudos to Cam Buckner. I like that bill. My final OG is Mark Burley getting a statue at Sox Park. That may be the only game all year worth going to this year for the White Sox. Notice I called it Sox Park. I will not call it Rate Field. But kudos to Mark Burley, one of my all-time favorite White Sox. All right, I got some clowns. I'm going to go fast. Brandon Johnson for refusing to let reporters in to see all of the expensive and lavish gifts that he and his administration have accepted, and then twisting and breaking the rules on what they are allowed to hold back and what they aren't allowed to hold back, and running one of the least transparent administrations we have ever seen, with their inability or unwillingness to deposit their checks and actually post them in a timely manner, to let the public know what gifts he's receiving, like Gucci bags, yet again showing the hypocrisy of Brandon Johnson. So another nomination, he's setting records for Clown of the Week nominations. Next, I got to give a Clown of the Week nomination for the CPS school board president, who wants $154,000 from the taxpayers to fund a driver and a Ford Expedition. Definitely gets your Clown of the Week nomination there. Also, JB Pritzker, because I, of course, have to include Pritzker, in a conference call with Chuck Schumer, he vented and complained because they're not, he wants them to reject every one of Donald Trump's nominees and completely freeze it. Now, this is the same J.B. Pritzker who complains that the Senate isn't enacting or accepting his nominations, the Prisoner Review Board. But for J.B. Pritzker, it's okay when he does it. It's just not okay when any Republicans do it. So yet another Clown of the Week nomination for J.B. Pritzker. And oh, by the way, he also complained about the fact he was on... Shoot, I don't have it. He was doing a TV interview, and he said that it's just completely ridiculous that Donald Trump and the Republicans may hold back resources from blue states like Illinois. Once you're elected, he says it's your job. You're supposed to represent everybody. You know, he, as the great governor of Illinois, represents everyone in Illinois, not just those people who voted for him. And yet I got to remind him of the many times that he has been extremely partisan. In fact, the most partisan governor we've ever seen. Every press conference, it's Republicans are horrible, Democrats are amazing. Also want to remind him of him supporting the fact that they do, every Democrat gets giveaways for their districts while every Republican gets nothing. But, you know, that's okay because it's okay when Pritzker does it. It's just not okay when Trump or Republicans do it. I'm almost done, I promise. Another Clown of the Week nomination. It's a big week for me. PETA gets a Clown of the Week nomination. They have suggested that Punxsutawney Phil should be replaced with a weather reveal cake. They no longer want the groundhog to reveal our weather to us. They want to use a weather reveal cake to let us know if winter is or isn't going to end. I think everybody in Woodstock, who's going to have a celebration coming up this weekend for Groundhog Day, should know that PETA wants them just to use a cake and find out, is it red, is it blue, or is it pink, or is it blue, or whatever they want to. Yet another ridiculous thing, even though I do support as an animal lover like my wife, but you know what? Sometimes PETA gets a bit ridiculous. By the way, if you haven't watched it, watch Groundhog Day this weekend. You got to do it in honor of Woodstock. It's an amazing movie.
And my birthday's Groundhog's Day, so I'm always in favor of the groundhog.
Celebrate Nicole on Groundhog's Day while you watch Bill Murray make you laugh. All right. Tiffany Henyard and Dalton has to be mentioned for that Thornton Township meeting where it just went crazy. There was a huge brawl. Apparently her wig fell off, if the tweets to be believed. But huge brawl in Thornton Township. It is devolving even worse every week that passes. And oh, by the way, Pritzker and the Democrats are like, hands off, hey, it's not our problem, even though it's all their people who are causing these problems. But they're like, not our problem. We're not going to deal with that. All right. I already mentioned this. Andy Ogles, the Republican congressperson from Tennessee in the 5th District, gets a giant Clown of the Week nomination for proposing an amendment to the U.S. Constitution that would allow Donald Trump to serve a 3rd term. We knew someone was going to be dumb enough to put this out, but why in the world would you do this and just give the media that dictator narrative they've been desperately waiting for? Andy Ogles, you are my unfortunate soul who actually did it. Everybody universally in the Republican Party has called him out for it, but it doesn't matter. The media ran with it. Trump's a dictator. Look at this. He's going to remove the Constitution, and he's Nazi and blah, 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 blah. Second to the last one here is the Housing Authority of Cook County for spending $60,000 at Six Flags when they have massive budget problems and lots of scandals coming out of that government agency, and yet they're spending $60,000 of taxpayer dollars to send their people to Six Flags. Come on, guys, get it together. Final one. My little boy Teddy wants me to let you know that the clown of the century is green vegetables. He absolutely hates them. He spits them out. He will not eat them. And so they are Teddy's Clown of the Week, green vegetables. You've been officially nominated. All right, we've had some fun. Let's get out of here. Closing thoughts. As always, we let everyone talk about whatever they want in their closing thoughts. Get our team first here. Michael, go ahead.
You're making me go first?
Yes, sir.
Well, we're getting into the thick of it on these municipals, so get prepared. If you've got a primary on February 25th, make sure you're doing your research because we got a country to save, and it starts at the local level.
I like it. April 1st is the general election for the consolidated elections. You better be out there voting if you're watching this. Chris, what do you got?
Happy Chinese New Year, everyone. It's the year of the snake, which means in politics, I encourage you all to look out for the snakes in the grass and the people that you associate with who could always stab you in the back. So happy Chinese New Year. Eat some Chinese food. We're having Chinese food tonight at my house. It might be the best meal I've had in months. So have a good week, everyone. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week, hopefully for a shorter episode where Colin doesn't have 17 clowns of the week, and not one of them wasn't him.
If they finally stop being clowns, I don't have to talk about them. All right, Katie, thank you so much for being with us. Your final thoughts today.
Just really heartened to see the fantastic bill signing of the Lincoln Riley Act yesterday. It was one of the top reasons that I'm a proud supporter of President Trump, and that was one of the main reasons, and it was beautifully executed and done. So kudos.
I've loved having your perspective. Thanks for being with us. Carolyn, your final thoughts for the week.
And my final thought all weeks are, if we could just stop governing with all of this chaos and crisis and start governing with thought and compassion. And you mentioned it earlier, Colin, we really need to strategically play this game of chess and stop playing this game of ping pong, because these constant jerky reactions are just driving me crazy. So
reasonable leaders, adults in the room. I think about a lot of the stuff that you and Paul talked about on the campaign trail, just a reasonable, responsible leadership. My goodness, would this state be better off if we had that?
Yeah, incrementalism too was always a key, governing and incrementalism is rather than these extremes. So
Nicole, thanks for being with us. You brought the heat. You get the final word. What do you got for us?
I don't have anything prepared, Woody. I hope I didn't bring too much heat, because I'm always nervous when I see on social media the reception. But this is a new world for me, being an actual state legislator. I'm extremely proud to serve as a Republican and proud to be on podcasts like this. I watch you guys all the time. I think it's great. I just I'd like to echo what Michael said. Your municipals are so important. Do your homework. Please show up. This is where it starts. Ask questions and do the research. And if any of my constituents are watching, please just feel free to stop by and say hello.
I like it. I mentioned that Quinnipiac University poll. I want to point out one final thing as we close on this episode. The Democratic Party's favorables and unfavorables were the worst deficit that Quinnipiac polling has ever seen in their history. 31% favorable, only, and 57% unfavorable. This is our time. This is our opportunity to get out there. Do not waste it. Stop with the petty squabbling. Stop with the BS. We get this one chance here. This one moment where Democrats are in massive disarray. They don't know what to do. The public is frustrated with them. Even their own base is frustrated and doesn't support a lot of the stuff that they're doing. We got work to do, because it's not as if we're favorable. We're at 43% favorable, 45% unfavorable. So we're at -2. But you know what? They're at -26. Now is the time to capitalize. So stop wasting my time. Stop wasting your time. Get out there and go earn some votes. This is our chance to do it. With that, thank you, Lane Davis, our producer. Thank you to everyone who participated. We'll catch you next week on the Smoke-Filled Room.